Okay, sorry for the delay, everybody. I apologize. I feel like during the pandemic, we became expert Zoomers and at these webinars, and now that we don't do this as often, our technology is not as cooperative today. So thank you so much for joining me today. I'm just going to start by sharing my screen here so that way everyone can see the slideshow that we are working on today. So we are excited to welcome the class of 2026 parents to Medfield High School today to join us to listen about some information as your sons and daughters are getting accustomed to the high school. So just so you have our agenda for today, we are going to start to provide some introductions to you. We're going to talk a little bit about tips for your child's success at the high school. We want to explain the role of the guidance counselor to you and how your students and you can access us in guidance. We want to start talking a little bit about graduation requirements, transcripts, GPAs, standardized testing, kind of all of these things that are high school terms that students will start to hear about and think about now as freshmen, but over the next 4 years of high school. We also want to give you folks some information about support resources that we have here available, and as well as communication and some school engagement tips. So that's our agenda for today. You will have an opportunity to hear from everybody in our office. So as I said, I'm Stephanie Worthley. So if your sons or daughters' last name begins A through B-E, they work with me. Last names B-R through E. Your student will work with Elise DeLuzio. F through K, Ann Lodge. L through Q, Amanda Patton, and the end of the alphabet, R through Z, students work with Mr. Ornberg. Also joining us today is our school adjustment counselor, Mr. Becker, and he is going to talk a little bit about his role, the difference between his role and a guidance counselor, and some programming that we have coming up with the freshmen as well. So to start today, I just want to mention, our freshmen are really starting to get used to the high school. As I've talked with some of my students and I've asked them, what they have enjoyed so far about high school, they tend to say things like a lot more freedom, a lot more flexibility. I think the students here really like our schedule, even though sometimes it can be hard to figure out what day it is or what period it is. Our students really like that they only have 5 classes a day compared to the 7 that they used to have at Blake. If you recall, the Blake schedule doesn't rotate. So you have the same class first period in the morning or the same class last period of the day. So here at Medfield High School, our schedule rotates with those classes. So it does offer students a nice opportunity to experience, different classes at different points of the day. If you have a class that maybe you don't love as much as others, you don't have that class every day. You're not preparing for as much homework daily. So it really has been, I think it's a nice change for many of our students. Several years ago, a group of educators from the high school went out to Stanford University in California, and Medfield has partnered with a program called Challenge Success. And I feel like it's just important to kind of talk about some of the tips and resources that Challenge Success provides for our students. The Challenge Success program, like I said, partners with schools and families, and the goal is really to support and promote healthy well-being and engagement for students. So, I like this article that talks a little bit about back to school tips really for parents. So, one of the things that you may notice is that your child may come home and is not as communicative as maybe they once were. So, if you start to ask them, how was your day? And kind of pepper them with questions, think of things that are more open-ended questions that they might be a little more engaged in talking about rather than just, how did you do on your math test today? But more like, how was your day? Did you learn anything interesting? Did you get to spend any time with friends? To really try to engage students in conversations, because as I'm sure you all know, the average teenager is a little more quieter than maybe they had been in the past. So, one of the nice things about the high school is we want students to become more resilient learners and people in general. So, you know, we want them to have small failures here that they can learn from. So things like their homework, or if they forget something at school, you know, resist the urge to correct errors in their homework. You know, we want the student to really be able to take ownership of their work and start to learn from their errors as well. You know, I know that it's a big difference at the high school when students start to receive grades. And it's always a big topic of conversation about grades, but, you know, we want students to really feel empowered, to feel good about the grades that they're earning, and not just so focused on getting A's. So that way they feel like they are working with the curriculum, engaged in the work that they're doing, and feel successful with that. I think one of the things that's really important for families is this PDF time, playtime, downtime, family time. Our students are so scheduled between school and after school activities, whether they're involved in theater or tech week coming up, or, you know, athletics, whatever the case may be. Our students feel that. And one of the things we did as a school district, I know I mentioned our schedule, but this schedule is only new to us by 2 years. And we changed our schedule to allow more flexibility in the day for students to have some downtime, which we'll talk about our flex period coming up in this presentation. But it's really critical for our students' kind of emotional well-being to have some downtime during the day. Technology, I'm sure families are struggling with this. I know my family is, you know, to create technology-free times, you know, maybe put phones away at meal times. It can be quite a distraction and interruption, and it's a definite challenge that families are, you know, dealing with. We're going to talk a little bit about communication later on in our program today, but really, you know, we encourage collaboration with teachers. We want to work together to really to support our kids and, you know, make sure that they're doing well, they're feeling confident, they're feeling comfortable, you know, and we encourage you to outreach to teachers if you feel like your child is not there. Again, those small failures, you know, if your child leaves something at home, they leave I feel like a lot of homework assignments are done online, but if they forget something, you know, resist that urge to run right here and bring it to them. We do a lot of work around sleep with students over the past few years through our advisory program and some surveys, you know, because there's so much research out there that supports, you know, how sleep deprivation can really be associated with depression and anxiety. And we feel that that's something that's really important that we want our students to be aware of. So that way they can maybe think, all right, maybe, you know, I've studied for this test enough, maybe I should put this away and go to bed now. We want them to feel well rested so that way they're ready to come to school and learn the next day. You know, again, as parents, I think it's just so important to really listen to your child and try to like zone in on the things that they're not saying. So, you know, if your child comes home and says, oh, I hate school, and like goes up to their room, well, what does that really mean? What's happening at school? Why do they hate that? What are they telling me? And I'm sure you all know this, you know, but it's just so important to have these conversations with our students now, and be in tune with what they're going through. I think especially our freshmen, you know, as they're transitioning to high school and really trying to find their way and figuring out what they're interested in, what they like, what they're feeling successful at, what they're struggling with, you know, it's just so important to have those conversations. And then, you know, we say to our freshmen all the time, like, if you're going home at 2:15 every day and not involved in anything, like, we want to know about that because we want our students to be involved. You know, high school is such an important time for students to really develop their strengths and interests. You know, and if there's something that they're doing outside of school, like that's great. After school, typically here is a very busy place. There's a lot of kids around doing different activities and such. So it's just so important for our students to really start to develop who they are and what they might be interested in, you know, kind of for what they want to do over the next 4 years. So just some tips that I feel like it's important for me to mention to parents as you are working with your sons and daughters on their time at high school, and to really start to develop relationships with students, relationships with teachers, and we want them to really have a great 4 years of high school. So I'm going to actually turn it over to Mr. Becker to introduce himself and talk a little bit about his role.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mrs. Worthley. Hello, folks. Based on the photo, you're probably assuming I'm Medfield's resident male model, and while that's very flattering, you'd actually be mistaken. My name is Russell Becker. I am the high school's adjustment counselor, otherwise known as a school social worker, which is a term that some more of you might be a little bit familiar with. My job here is to provide mental health support to any student within the confines of our building. It's no surprise that, especially over the past couple of years, many of our students have struggled with their mental health and have needed either direct or indirect attention in that area, whether it be in the form of consistent scheduled counseling, resource allocation, or short-term situational management. I'm someone who can help and can be accessed by either your child or you directly at any point in time. Like I said, I am the school adjustment counselor for the entirety of the school. So whether your child needs help now, whether they need help in a couple of years from now, or whether you would just like to know a little bit more about my services and how I may or may not be able to support you and your child, my email is there below, and always feel free to reach out to me directly. You can go for it, Stephanie. Thank you. Another element of my position is to deliver mental health curriculum to our students, and I wanted to make you aware of the Signs of Suicide curriculum that we'll be delivering the week of December 12th. This may sound familiar as it's the second part of a three-part series that we disseminate to students during their 7th, 9th, and 12th grade years. Each version of the presentation is tailored specifically to the age group, and this particular iteration aims to hit on 3 specific goals. The first of which is to inform our students about what some of the signs and symptoms of depression and suicide may be, as well as informing them of how they can get support for themselves or a friend or a loved one if they feel it's at all appropriate. The second goal is to connect them with myself and the guidance staff here. Knowing that they're still brand new to the building and getting to know us, we find that it's really beneficial to deliver this presentation so they get some direct face time with us and can sort of start familiarizing themselves with their counselors and just the guidance staff as a whole. Lastly, for those who need direct support as a result of this presentation, we're obviously here to deliver that and navigate what levels of support may be necessary and beneficial for them at that time or in the future. As many of you might know, this is a totally optional lesson, but if you are curious or if you want to know more about the presentation and what this looks like, I'm happy, you're always welcome to, contact me directly. And if you want to go through the presentation or if you have any specific questions, please feel free to reach out at any point in time. With that said, I think I will now kick it over to Mrs. DeLuzio, who is going to go over the specifics of what guidance does and what this looks like in the high school.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Hi, everyone. I'm Elise DeLuzio, but I know my nameplate here says Eric Ornberg. Part of our technical difficulties, I am sharing an office with Mr. Ornberg right now, but I'm happy to have a chance to talk a little bit more about, as your child's guidance counselor, what are the different areas that we can support them in. So those 3 categories you see on your screen are really kind of our primary framework. So thinking about academics, this would include things like figuring out the class schedule, picking classes and planning ahead for the future. For students who may be having difficulty in a course, sort of guiding them to access extra help or have discussions about placement if that's a concern. Right now, we are working on connecting some students with different needs with both accessing teachers during flex and also using, for example, some of our peer tutors here in the school building. And then in terms of future planning, we do have in the guidance department some proactive lessons that we deliver to students each year. So that's something we go into classrooms for. And then we also have many one-on-one conversations with students about their interests and future plans as they progress through high school. And then lastly, in the social emotional domain, sometimes these are sort of planned, bigger picture conversations, but sometimes a student just has a need in a moment, in a day, and they certainly are welcome to access us during the school day should the need arise. So a little bit about what you can expect and when we plan to see our 9th graders this year. We're thrilled to have them here in the high school. We loved meeting with them over at Blake in June, and our goal for this fall is we check in with each of our 9th graders individually. So we have them down in our office, usually during a flex period, to see how everything is going, how the transition has been. And we really love having those conversations with students and seeing how everything's progressing for them, and of course, offering support if needed. And then about midway through the year, we start to plan ahead for next year, which seems hard to believe, but we will again check in with students and offer support there as well. We also checked in with students in a bigger group earlier this year. And then of course, as needs arise, we are certainly available. And I know all of us have open door policies for students that need us urgently. And of course, students can also access us through MyFlexLearning to schedule appointments if there's something they would like to chat with us about. And as parents, I would also say, you know, if you feel like there's something that we should know about your child and you want to fill us in on something going on outside of or within school, certainly feel free to reach out to us as well. So a little bit more just about how students can actually schedule with us. So the flex periods, you know, I know our rotating schedule looks a little crazy, especially for those of you, if it's your first child here at the high school. Parents will often say to us, you know, it's my first child that's a freshman, and I feel like it's my freshman year too as a parent because I'm getting to know all the ins and outs. But the students do have these flex periods, which average out to roughly 3 times a week of free time. It's about 200 minutes of free time for the students, which has been, as Mrs. Worthley mentioned, a huge positive. Students really enjoy it. And they can use some of that free time if they choose to meet with teachers, but also with us. So they can schedule right on their phones through their MyFlexLearning app. And then we also can see kids. There's a 10-minute break during everyone's day. Every day of the week, that's called EPT, extended passing time. And that's when we roll out the snack carts and students have a chance for a quick breather and a snack. And sometimes we'll come down to check in with us for something quick. And as I mentioned before, certainly if something urgent comes up, they're welcome to just ask to come to our office at any time. And we are also here after school and are happy to schedule with students if they would like to do after school. We just ask them to reach out to us to coordinate a time and make sure that we are available. So that being said, I am going to transition over to Mr. Ornberg.
Thank you, Mrs. DeLuzio. I'm getting better at playing musical chairs here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about graduation requirements. First off, I did want to just build off of what Mrs. Worthley had said too about the first term of 9th grade is really about transition to high school. And oftentimes it's not the student's best term. Oftentimes term 2 is when, now that they've gotten to know the kids and the teachers and the expectations of the classes, that you see some real growth and progress term 2. So we're very hopeful for that for all of the 9th graders. In terms of graduation requirements, they're listed here. In Medfield High School is about credit accumulation. You need 115 total credits to graduate. I would say a large majority of Medfield graduates will leave here with 140 credits. They usually earn 35 credits per year. In terms of core requirements, English is a 4-year requirement. You can see that you need 20 credits of English. History, science, and math are all 3-year requirements. The math requirement to attend a Massachusetts State College, which is very popular for our seniors when they apply, is to have 4 years of math. The math department has worked hard at trying to give appropriate options for seniors in math. Wellness is a 2-year requirement, 10 credits, but students are expected to attend wellness class each year, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. World language is also a 2-year requirement. A number of students are walking around here that have taken beyond the 2-year requirement in the same language. We have some kids that have taken multiple languages in their 4-year tenure here. And then we have a 1-year expectation of 5 credits of a visual or applied art. This is where your music, technology courses, the business courses, that's where those would be covered. Oftentimes students worry about this and come into our offices as seniors saying, I don't think I met the requirement. And sure enough, freshman year in their advertising and marketing class, they were able to do that. We can go to the next slide, Mrs. Worthley. Thank you. So a transcript, I think students are coming from the middle school with standards-based reporting and report cards. Report cards certainly exist here. They'll be coming out in a week or so for term 1. But the transcript is a permanent record of students' academic performance. As the resident old person here in this office, I can tell you our transcript has changed tremendously. And I think it benefits our kids, and I'll give you an example of that in a moment. But the transcript is very straightforward. It shows the name of the course, the level of the course, College 1, College 2, Honors or AP, the final grade for the course, and starting in February, students will earn a grade point average, both weighted and unweighted, that will be listed on the transcript as well. This is a permanent record. When we talk about permanent record at the high school, we're talking about a transcript that's something that sticks around for 60 years in our office. If students attend college later in their life, if they move from another country and need a driver's license, we keep this stuff on file for 60 years after they graduate. So this is a nice visual. This is what a transcript would look like for a term 1 senior. And you can see here, again, just verifying, obviously the name and address is on here, year of graduation, the guidance counselor. The GPAs are listed below in the middle, and then each quadrant will represent 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. In addition to that, it does talk about the honors and AP mark, what a passing grade is, the fact that we're an accredited institution. Transcripts right now for freshmen are blank slates. They will not have a GPA until February at the conclusion of term 2. The GPA gets updated on the semester. We don't do it by term. So students will have a GPA in February at the conclusion of term 2. And then again in June, that GPA will shift again at the end and conclusion of their freshman year. And on that transcript, there are 2 GPAs. And the grade point average is the value of the accumulated final grades earned in the courses over time. And I think this is important to note because sometimes students have a rough term. They may confront a very challenging portion of one discipline or another and struggle, but it's not necessarily, the grade is not necessarily going to impact what their GPA is until the end of the semester or the end of the year. In 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, all count equally. I think there's a myth out there that junior year is the only year that counts. We try to tell our students that the term you're in, the semester you're in, and the year you're in is the one that counts the most. And again, every year tells its own story. 9th grade, term 1, is a transitional portion of their high school experience. Most students do not come over polished to the expectations of Medfield High School, but they accumulate that experience throughout the course of the 180 days that they're here. The weighted and unweighted GPAs, again, calculated at the conclusion of the semester. Medfield works off of a 4.0 GPA scale. A 4.0 equals an A, and as students enroll in honors or AP courses at the end of the year or semester, they are given a 0.8 bump in their classes. So a student getting an A in an honors English class is going to have a weighted grade value of 4.8. This sounds confusing, but this is something we explain to the students. And again, some kids, we want to make sure that they're not becoming hyper-focused on what the GPA is, but that they do understand the scales that we use. And I think at this point, I'm going to hand it over. Oh, I want to do the standardized testing before I give it over to Mrs. Lodge. So standardized tests have certainly, the paradigm has shifted in the last few years for students taking the SAT and ACT. A number of colleges and universities have gone test optional. So in years past, we've tried to spell out what a standardized testing map would look like for 9th graders coming into the building. In 9th grade, we're just hoping that they get to June and take the science MCAS, which is one of the state requirements for graduation. They passed the bio MCAS, students got their scores. The 10th graders got those not too long ago, but a month ago. Sophomore year, the next hurdle would be the ELA and the math MCAS. In the fall of sophomore year, we offer a low stakes, non-required practice ACT. The ACT is again, nationally sophomore normed assessment, just getting the kids the experience of coming in on a Saturday, bringing their pencils and their ID. It is definitely not required. We had about 70 out of the 200 sophomores this year take the pre-ACT. Junior year, we do encourage students to take the PSAT. This is normed for juniors, gives kids access to the practice SAT. And then the SAT and ACT are recommended to take at least one during the junior years. Students are more equipped or score better on the SAT or the ACT, and counselors can encourage them which lane to stay in. The ACT does have a section on science for kids that have an affinity for science, where the SAT does not. If students enroll in AP courses junior year, they are expected to sit for the AP exam in May, and very similar for senior year. We will have a couple of kids that will take I think we had about 91 total students, not all Medfield kids, take the SAT in October of senior year, which was probably their second or third sitting. And again, if you are enrolled in an AP course as a senior, you would be expected to take that AP exam during school in the month of May. So that's our standardized testing map. And I will now shift over to Mrs. Lodge.
Hi, everyone, and thanks again for joining us today. Just one housekeeping item before I start speaking. I know we're sharing a ton of information today, so if any of you do have questions that come up as we're presenting, please don't hesitate to put your questions in the Q&A section. We'll monitor that and answer them as best we can as we go along, and certainly review common questions towards the end of the presentation together. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking a little bit more about Flex. So I'm sure you've heard your sons and daughters talking about this, and it really is a fabulous resource for students built in during the school day where they can get support. I think the fact that it's built in is really helpful for freshmen as they're going through that transition. The way that it works here at the high school, I know Elise had mentioned previously that there are 5 flexes in an 8-day cycle that are all 67 minutes long. So it meets the same amount of times as a typical course does. And it might be 3 or 4 times in a given week, depending on how the cycle flows. Each flex is actually broken up into 2 different parts, a part A and a part B. So they're about 32, 33 minutes long each. And students are given the opportunity during their flex day 1, part A, so the first flex in a cycle, to spend time planning out how they're going to use their flexes for the remaining flex opportunities in that particular 8-day cycle of classes. So this is a great opportunity for students to spend a little bit of time looking at their calendar, looking at their to-do list, and figuring out where they might need some additional support. During flex, students can flex in with their guidance counselor if they need to check in with us for any particular reason. They can get extra help with their teachers, and they'll sign up in our MyFlex Learning app to go visit with a teacher where they might need to make up an assignment, get some additional support with some work in that class, or have any sort of a conversation with them. We also have something at the high school called the Writing Center, and it's staffed by one of our English teachers and some students as well. And the Writing Center is really designed to help students with any part of the writing process, anywhere from brainstorming in the early stages of a writing assignment to the final edits before a student hands in that particular piece to their teacher. The writing subject takes typically 2 students per flex, so they're in high demand at different points in time, but always a great opportunity for students to try to work to get some additional support with their writing. And for any child who might need some additional support with their study skills or executive functioning skills across different content areas, we have an academic success center that runs on days 3 and days 8 of our flex cycle. So that's a great opportunity for students to get some additional support, maybe planning out their flexes or working on their study and organizational skills if they need some additional support. You might find that teachers might pull students into their flex if they need to touch base with them, but students also have the opportunity to flex in themselves with conversation with their teachers. You might find, or we find sometimes, that students some students are really good about using their Flex as well, using it maybe to get work done, but also seek out their teachers. And some kids might need a little additional prompting at the beginning of freshman year, figuring out how best to utilize their Flexes. So if you feel like your child might be in that position, needing some additional support or nudging to get out and see their teachers, please don't hesitate to reach out to your child's counselor so we can sit down with them and help them figure out how to utilize their time best as they move forward into term 2 and beyond. Another resource that we have available through the guidance office is our peer tutoring network. So we maintain a list of peer tutors who are upperclassmen who have volunteered their time to help support any student in different content areas. This really is an awesome opportunity for kids to get that help and support that they might need in addition to Flex and seeing their teacher. Students have volunteered their time to certain subject areas, but also we have a number of volunteers who will work specifically with students on their time management skills, on their organization, or on their study skills. So this is just an additional layer of support for the students if they might feel more comfortable talking with an upperclassman or a peer to get some support in their classes. If you or your child is interested in finding a peer tutor, they can touch base with their guidance counselor and we can review the peer tutor list with them to help them find somebody who might be a good match. And then that peer tutoring can take place either during a Flex period, if that works for both students, or anytime after school that works for both individuals. We also have a new program that started towards the end of last year, which is fabulous. It's our LINK peer tutoring programs. That stands for Leaders in Knowledge. And these students are actually sharing their time during Flexes, and they are working with certain teachers to help provide an additional layer of support in that teacher's Flex classroom. So for example, there might be a biology class that has both the teacher in there and a LINK peer tutor, both providing supports to any student that Flex is in needing support in biology. Again, it's a fabulous way for students to get some additional support from their peers who have been in those classes in the past. And it's a good thing to keep in mind for your sons and daughters as they move forward in sophomore, junior, and senior year, that this might be a nice volunteer opportunity for them as they move forward as well. Thank you. As we're talking about support in the classes and making sure that all students are getting what they need, along those same lines certainly comes communication with teachers and communication with the guidance counselors as well. And we just want to make sure that everyone's clear on sort of the lines of support and how best we can all work together. One of our goals as a school district is making sure that we're in communication with families. And we want to make sure that you have the best possible way of doing that. So if you ever feel like you are concerned about your child's academics or their grades, and if it's in a particular class setting, your first line is always to be in touch with the teacher. They're going to be able to best answer your questions, provide feedback on how your child might be doing in a particular area, or feedback in general about the class. And if you feel like maybe you're not getting the answer that you need, or you need additional information, the next line is always to talk to the department chair, and then sort of works to administration from there. Certainly along those lines, the guidance counselor always loves to be looped in so we can help support your child with whatever might be going on as well. So feel free always to loop in the guidance counselor if you have questions that are being directed to a teacher about a specific class, so we can be in the loop and help support you and your son and daughter through that process as well. I think at this point, we're going to turn things over to Amanda Patton.
Perfect. Thank you, Anne. I'm going to talk a little bit about a resource that I think is really helpful for all families to have. It's called the MHS FAQ Centers. So this can be found on the high school website under the Explore section. And actually, Stephanie, if you're able to navigate over to the actual site, I can point out a couple of different features that might be helpful. Perfect. So here's what the actual site looks like. So on the main page, you can see that it's broken down based off of seniors, juniors, sophomores, and freshmen. So you can click on whichever class is applicable to your child and read about, any updates that have been sent out. I don't know if there's a lot there for freshmen at the moment, but usually this is information that has been emailed to families or posted in our news update that's sent out to families on Mondays. But it's just a nice website to bookmark and refer back to if you try to think like, oh, I got an email about this, I can't remember, where to find this information. Check the FAQ site because that's where everything is saved. One other resource on this website I want to point out is that the top tab under calendars and schedules, if you click on the monthly high school bell schedule, and there's a couple of different versions here, but I find this visual to be really, really helpful. You can see, what the schedule is every day for the entire month. So you can print this out ahead of time. I have this printed out on my bulletin board. It's just really helpful to help your child remember, okay, what do I have this week? What classes do I have going on? Do I have flex today or not? It's just a really nice visual to have up somewhere to reference. There's also a full year academic calendar off of this website. So lots of nice calendar visuals that you can access. So again, this is a great website for you and your child to bookmark somewhere. The other section that I want to take a look at is under clubs and events on the top right of this same website. So here is where you can learn about all of the different clubs we have at the high school. So earlier on this fall, we had a club fair where all students came down during Flex and got to learn from all of the students who run clubs, about what's offered and when the clubs meet and things like that. So hopefully your child came home excited about one club as an example. But here's where you can see a list of all of the different clubs and advisors. So if your child hasn't gotten a chance to get involved in anything yet, a club is a really great way to get to know upperclassmen and, who have a shared interest with you. Typically, the clubs aren't a super huge time commitment. They typically meet around once a week or once a cycle after school. Some clubs meet more than others. So this is definitely just a great way to get to know other kids in the building and do something that is fun. In terms of the club meetings, so as I mentioned, they're typically after school, and we're really excited to share that there is now a late bus. So if your child doesn't have transportation after school and they want to be able to go to a club meeting or meet with a teacher after school, there is a late bus available. In the news update that's emailed to families every Monday, there's information about the late bus and where to access it. So definitely keep an eye out for that, or keep that in mind if your child does need to stay after school and they don't have transportation. Stephanie, if you go back to the slides, that would be great. So the next thing I want to talk about is one of our clubs called the Medfield Theater Society. So we have an amazing theater organization here. They typically do a fall play, which is coming up, I believe, in another week or so. They do a musical in the spring, and then later on in the year, they do senior one acts. So these are short plays that are student written and directed by students. So it's a really great way for kids to who have been in the program to kind of be in a leadership position, and oftentimes these one acts are funny and just really enjoyable for kids to work together and put on for an audience. So those are the typical 3 performances. And the great thing about theater is that you don't necessarily have to be an actor or a singer to be involved. There are so many different roles within the Theater Society, including working on the sets or stage managing and things like that. It also involves students from all 4 grade levels in all different social groups. So if your child is having trouble kind of figuring out where they fit in, or there's a shift happening in their friend group. The Theater Society is a really inclusive environment, and there's typically some kind of a role for everybody. So certainly reach out to your child's guidance counselor if you want to talk more about getting involved in theater, or you can access this website as well to learn more about how to get involved and who to contact. The last thing I want to talk about is athletics. So you may have seen in the news update that registration for winter sports is happening now. So again, you can access this all on the high school website or on that Medfield FAQ site. You can see here when each sport is running throughout the year. So definitely take a look at the registration deadlines and make sure that you have everything submitted if your child is participating in a winter sport. You know, now that it's the end of term one, your child has gotten a better sense of what high school is like, what their classes are like. Some students may have made a level change at some point this term academically. Students may have been participating in a ton of activities and maybe starting to realize, you know what, I don't think I can do all of these things. Or maybe your child is someone who didn't get involved in anything yet, and they want to set a goal to try to get involved with something term two. I think this is a really good time as a family to kind of reflect on how term one went academically and also socially, and try to figure out if any adjustments should be made, especially when it comes to extracurriculars. I know a lot of our students have a lot of different interests, and that's wonderful. We want students to be involved, but I think it's really important to be mindful about you know, the number of activities, the time commitment, and making sure that each child has that playtime, downtime, and family time that Stephanie was talking about. So again, end of term one, a great time to reflect on the academic piece of their experience and the extracurricular, and figure out where to make adjustments if needed. Slide.
Okay, thanks, Amanda.
Back to Stephanie, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So the biggest takeaway that I hope you parents walk away with today is just that communication is key. So communication with your sons and daughters. You know, we really hope that you will communicate with us, especially if you have any worries or concerns that you're seeing at home. But places to find some information for you. The guidance website has a lot of great information for you that we've put on there over the years. So definitely take a look at the guidance page when you have an opportunity. But again, email us or call us if you are having questions. Like Ann said, we love to be in the loop of what's going on with your children. So we do also have a Google Classroom set up for the class of 2026. I don't think they've used it much yet, and that's okay. We will, as we move forward, working with students over the next 4 years, especially when it starts coming toward thinking about what they might like to do after high school. But again, communication with teachers is really important. Many of our teachers, you know, have open grade books on Aspen. If not, there is a window of time where teachers have to have their grade books open. It's about halfway through the term, so it's progress report time, so that way you can have access to students' grades and see how your son and daughter is doing. But many of our teachers do use Google Classroom that I'm sure many of our students are familiar with. You may even, as a parent, have signed up to get Google Classroom updates. When I've seen those for students, I don't always find them overly helpful, except to see if like there's an assignment missing or something like that. But even still, it's just some more information for you as a parent to see what your son and daughter is working on. And again, the lines of communication really are encouraged with teachers. We want you to feel comfortable and empowered to reach out to a teacher if you have questions. And certainly, you know, we can help support that along the way. And I think it was Eric that mentioned the news flash. You know, the Monday news flash that goes out to families is always a great resource for you, just to see what's going on here at the high school. You know, there may be an activity coming up or a show or, you know, something that the guidance office is offering. So definitely, you know, kind of take a quick peruse at that news flash weekly, the FAQ site that Amanda just talked about, and then certainly, You know, if you've been in Medfield for a while, you know that people are pretty active on Twitter. Not always the guidance office, but we try. So definitely follow the Medfield High School Twitter account, the AD account, and so forth. So again, the communication just is so important. We really want to work together to ensure that our students are finding success here. I would like to turn it to Anne for a minute to see if there were any Q&A questions that were in the chat that we could address as a large group.
Sure. Just a quick point of clarification. If your child has a last name in the beginning of the alphabet, I think our slide might have been off a little bit. So students whose last names begin with B-I through E do work with Elise DeLuzio. I think we had a typo there. So for anyone who might be confused, where that falls into. And then just one other question, as we started talking about the standardized testing that's coming up throughout the year, there's a question around MCAS and the biology MCAS that students will take in June of this year. And the question just being, what happens if students don't pass that MCAS for whatever reason? Rest assured, there will be plenty of opportunities to retest. So if your child does not pass the biology MCAS for any reason, they would be given the opportunity to retest in the fall of their sophomore year. We will work with them to make sure that we get them whatever support that they might need in order to get to their passing marks to move forward to graduation. Those were all of the questions that came through at this point.
Great. Well, as you know, if parents walk away from this later today and you think of a question that you didn't ask and you wish you had, please feel free to reach out to us in the guidance office, you know, at any time. I am going to download this presentation and share it with all families later. So if you're talking with a friend and they say, oh, I missed it today, not to worry, we will send the recording out to everyone. So we are also going to meet with all of our students, freshman students, before Thanksgiving to provide them with many of the same information, especially things about the transcript and grades and standardized testing and all of that good stuff. So if you mention it to your child later and they don't know what you're talking about, that's okay. We are going to get this information to them in the next few weeks. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. I apologize for the technical difficulties, and we look forward to meeting you all soon. Take care.